Hey, it's Jer Stays, and welcome to your Daily Detroit for Friday, January 15th, 2021. Today, we're doing a deep dive on the pandemic and answering some questions that listeners have been sending in. Specifically, what are these mRNA vaccines and how do they work? To help me do this, Dr. Paul Thomas from Plum Health Direct Primary Care is back to guide us. But before we jump in, a quick thanks to our members on Patreon who keep this podcast going. You are awesome, and you can get some Daily Detroit swag at patreon.com/Daily Detroit. All right, let's dive in. Welcome back to Daily Detroit.
Jared, thanks for having me. It's really great to be here.
It is good to talk to you, and it's a mixed bag of coronavirus news. I want to get into the latest with the pandemic, but also some big listener questions that we've gotten over the last couple of weeks around mRNA. But let's start with the current state of the pandemic, where we're at now. The most recent is that the indoor dining ban has been extended through January 31st with an eye towards reopening indoor service in some way in February. This is in light of the current situation where we've got just over 531,000 confirmed cases as of Thursday, 13,672 deaths, 2,698 confirmed daily cases, which is actually better than the rest of the nation, but not great. And then 139 adjusted daily COVID-19 deaths. And I say adjusted because they're vital death records. Those deaths happened recently, but it's something where it catches up and that goes up and down because of the reporting system. But Dr. Paul, what is the real estate of where we're at now?
I'm hopeful for a brighter future. And you talked about some of the negative stats, but on the positive side, we have been starting to vaccinate more and more Michigan residents. And I think we're seeing some really positive signs, especially here in Detroit, around getting mass vaccines available to people. And so it's great that the TCF Center is now open and accepting people who are 70 plus to get their vaccine. And so it's nice to see that happening. And it looks like we've vaccinated 3.3% of our state's population so far, which is good in terms of like a national average. That puts us in the middle of the pack in terms of the number of people that we've vaccinated so far.
Well, and one data point I want to point to that's on COVID Act now is our positive test rate is now below 9%. And below 10 is start to be where you start to be making some progress. Our ICU capacity is below 80% used. So those are all good metrics.
These are the things that you would like to see. And it points to the fact that some of those levers that we pulled as state health officials helped to tamp down the virus spread. So closing bars and restaurants, as painful as it has been through November, December, and January, I think that it was a good tool to use to help us bring down the case count in looking at a long-term perspective. Because let's face it, we all knew that people were going to gather around the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, etc. And closing down the restaurants served as a nice counterbalance to that spike that would come from people gathering regularly anyways. I think there are some positive signs here that we are doing better and looking towards a brighter future as the months go on.
Well, and to even see the idea that indoor dining might be reopened is an interesting development. Just to remind folks, and this was something that we get asked a lot, is like, why are restaurants picked on? And I wanted to get into the reason for it. And I mean, people say, I need updated data, this and that. But I think there is a fundamental truth about the virus that we just have to internalize and understand. And I think we've covered it a little bit, but why don't we get into that issue that restaurants and bars and places like it specifically have?
Yeah, bars and restaurants are the worst place to go during a pandemic because they're great places to spread a virus. There's a ton of surfaces. It's really impossible to wipe down every single surface. They usually have a low ceiling, an enclosed space, and the air ventilation system usually recirculates air. And so you're going to pick up viral particles really easily, no matter how far you are from somebody with a virus. If there's somebody with a virus in the restaurant, you have a pretty high chance of catching the virus, regardless of how far apart you are. And if you think about how you socialize in a bar, usually it's noisy, it's crowded, you lean towards people to talk into their ear, so you get really close to other people. And then if you think about adding food service and beverage service, there's just a ton of surfaces that are really difficult to sanitize. So it makes the prospect of indoor dining really difficult and a high likelihood of getting the virus if you were to stay at a bar or restaurant for a long time.
And I've seen a number of studies that show that you can be in there for just a few minutes and even as far as 20 feet away and still get a high load of viral particles, because at the end of the day, like the difference between going to Target and going to a bar is that Target has a much larger, or you name your retail store. I was just pulling that out of the air, but like
Kroger, Meijer.
Right. You've got a much larger air volume, plus you're constantly wearing a mask, correct?
Yeah, and in a bar and restaurant, you're taking off your mask to eat or drink. And some people will just pull down their mask because they want to yell into somebody's ear, almost like a reflex thing. But when you're at a supermarket, you're really going to be wiping down the bar of the shopping cart and then picking individual items, bagging them, and going home. And you're not going to be touching your face or putting food into your mouth or eating with your hands or anything like that, or socializing with people in close contact because you're engaging in a solo activity when you're shopping. Whereas if you're at a restaurant, that's a much more of a communal or a social activity.
And there's also studies about how talking and how loud you talk and how much you talk also emits more particles, right?
Of course, yeah. If you laugh, talk, yell, cough, sneeze, etc., all those are going to emit much more particles than if you're not talking or talking in a whisper at a lower volume. And if you think about it, it makes sense. If you hold your hand in front of your face and talk loudly, you'll feel a forceful expression of air. But if you whisper, you'll not feel so much coming out. So it's something that we know intuitively, but it's a tough pill to swallow because we all love our restaurants here in Detroit. We really want to support our independent restaurateurs and see them thrive and succeed. But it's just like a really bad place in terms of spreading the virus.
I get the feeling that if we socialize like that in, say, a real estate office, we'd still have the same problems, right?
Of course.
It's not necessarily picking on a restaurant or a bar. It's just the science of the thing. The question that I've gotten a lot and from a number of listeners, and this is one that actually kind of surprised me because I've kind of had my head buried in this COVID-19 world for a while for the last few months, but there is a lot of confusion around mRNA vaccines and what they are. In fact, I've had a number of people ask me, like, can I get sick from the mRNA vaccine? How does it work? Does it work like a standard vaccine? There's even a lot of misinformation out there. So really today, I wanted to spend the bulk of the time kind of explaining what an mRNA vaccine is and what are its benefits and what are its unknowns. And I will fully disclose right here that I know a few people who have already gotten said vaccine and no third eyes have grown yet.
Yeah, and I'm one of those people. Fortunately, the Detroit Health Department reached out to our office and we were able to get our staff vaccinated that way. So we're really grateful to the folks at the Detroit Health Department. And I can run you through scientifically what happens when you get an mRNA vaccine. And it's really cool science. So basically, this coronavirus vaccine, we've seen it. It's like a ball with spikes on it. And that virus is made up of individual proteins. When you get the mRNA vaccine, the mRNA goes into your cells and your cells use that synthetic mRNA or that manufactured mRNA to make the protein, specifically the spike protein only of the virus. So you're not getting the coronavirus, you're just getting the coronavirus spike protein. And think of it as like a most wanted sign put up in your town. Your body is creating a most wanted sign for this coronavirus. And so when it sees the actual virus come into your system, it's already primed to kill that coronavirus because it already recognizes those spike proteins on the surface of the virus. And so you're priming your immune system. Now, anytime you engage your immune system, you can feel run down because you're generating a robust immune response. You're creating antibodies, you're amping up your white blood cell count. Sometimes you can get a low-grade fever. Sometimes you can feel soreness at the injection site and fatigue. And the vast majority of people have had mild symptoms. We're talking about 99.9% of people have had very mild symptoms. Some people have had an allergic reaction for which they've needed some Benadryl or maybe some epinephrine to get them through. We haven't seen anyone die from getting the coronavirus vaccine so far, so that's really encouraging. So overall, this has been a very safe vaccine. The other thing is we're not growing a protein in like a chicken egg or something. So if you have like a egg allergy, it's safer than, let's say, the flu vaccine that's grown using like a chicken egg or something like that.
The body does this anyway with messenger RNA, which is, it's kind of like blueprints that cells use to talk to each other, as I'm understanding it.
Exactly.
And you're kind of sharing new blueprints and sharing the wanted poster, as you said, hey, look out for this virus. But it's not dead virus. That's another big thing, is that a lot of vaccines are deactivated or dead or weakened viruses. This is none of that. You cannot get the coronavirus from mRNA.
That's right. Let's take the flu vaccine, for example. They grow flu proteins using like chicken eggs or whatever, and they inject the protein particles, but it doesn't have any of the genetic material, none of the RNA that could replicate that flu inside your body. So you're just getting the proteins. What's genius about this is that we're just using mRNA so that our bodies create the proteins by themselves. So we're using this messenger strip of RNA to create some spike proteins of the coronavirus, and that signals your body to prepare for the coronavirus if it should enter your body so it can kill it rapidly and you don't get as sick.
And although this is the first widespread application because, global pandemic, mRNA vaccines, like this is not something that was invented a year ago. I think there's like this misconception that a year ago we just came up with this thing. It's something we've been working on for a while.
Yeah, the scientific community has been working diligently to advance science forever. And, this is just the next iteration on the next thing that could help our humanity, the human race, be healthier and survive longer as time goes on. So, these are the really exciting advancements in science that, there's this body of scientific knowledge through trial and error, through studies, through a lot of different experiments. And then, you come to fruition with something like this, and it's really a beautiful thing. This is such an elegant design for a vaccine. It's really incredible to stop and think about this.
It may even find uses in other ways. One of the pieces of information I found out a couple days ago is they're using mRNA technology, and preliminarily they've been able to make strides against multiple sclerosis, which is huge news.
Sure. Yeah. What if you were able to find a cancer receptor and make an mRNA that creates a protein that blocks that cancer receptor? This has so many applications. We could potentially use something like this to cure cancer or treat multiple sclerosis or maybe treat Alzheimer's disease or thyroid conditions. What if you could create a mRNA strip that creates a protein that helps your thyroid heal? Or, there's just so many different applications because our bodies are full of proteins and cells that make proteins that code other things.
So the key here for people to realize, I think, from what you're saying, is this is a major advance in technology, kind of like, I don't know, the difference between when we used to have like green screen laptops and what our MacBook Pro does.
Yeah, it's like going from a flip phone to an iPhone.
Wow.
Or a smartphone. This is one of those giant leaps in the scientific community that is really tremendous. It's really incredible to see how this might be applied in the future.
Well, I'm really glad to get all that background, and I'm really glad to hear a bit of positivity in your voice, Doctor, about the future. I mean, we've got a while to go, but it seems like we're starting to at least be on the right path.
I've been feeling bad about our interviews for so long because I've been such a downer every week. And it's kind of nice to talk about something I'm excited about. I'm excited about this because, it looks like it's working so far. And, everybody's nervous when you have a new vaccine that you might have side effects or severe reactions. And so far we haven't seen that. And so it's really exhilarating.
Yeah, and I'm glad to be able to be of service to answer some questions. That vaccine line that the city of Detroit opened up on Monday, they said they had more than 100,000 calls in a morning, not just for trying to get an appointment, but information. I think there's just like a really big gap in information out there that I think it's just so important. I mean, we spent about 15 minutes together today, but that's something that a lot of folks aren't able to do. They're only able to spend a couple of minutes. And I think people need a little bit more background and info. And I really encourage people to keep submitting their questions so that we can at least try to be of service.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. I try to do a lot of that on my blog, plumhealthdpc.com/blog. And I've been trying to keep people really updated on where they can get the vaccine, who's eligible. Right now, we're in that phase 1A and starting to get into that phase 1B. Phase 1B starts with those folks 75 years of age and older, and it's going to continue through childcare workers, teachers, police and fire, and eventually we'll get to a broader group of folks in our community.
Dr. Paul Thomas, Plum Health Direct Primary Care. You can find him at plumhealthdpc.com. For once, Doc, I'm hanging up and I'm not feeling bad about myself.
Awesome, Jer. It's a great feeling that we're getting to this point, and hopefully it gets better and better as time goes on.
Before I let you go for the week, I've heard more than a few listeners have had issues getting new episodes of the show. Look, it's a complicated thing, but make sure you're subscribed to our official podcast feeds in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you are. Listener and member Lynn made us aware there was a secondary Google Podcast feed that stopped updating with the new year and was wondering why she hadn't gotten any episodes. And I don't want to break Lynn's heart. Do you want to break Lynn's heart? I don't want to do it. So we got on it, found out what was going on, got her set up with the right feed on Google Podcasts. We can help you as well in case you're having problems. I guess we've made it when random people are putting out copies of our show. This isn't the first time. It probably won't be the last. You can get the official links, as I said, at dailydetroit.com. We have buttons for all major podcast apps, or just email me if you ever have issues, jer@dailydetroit.com, and we'll sort you out if you ever have any trouble. And heck, we might even put Engineer Randy on the case. By the way, thanks, Engineer Randy, for troubleshooting this and figuring all of this out. You are appreciated. And that is it for the week for your Daily Detroit podcast. I am Jer Stays. Thanks so much for listening. Take care of each other, and we'll get through this together.